the hatred that informs Donald Trump and his policies are not very different from these mass shooter neo-Nazis. Donald Trump is making their dreams come true.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the Midas Touch Network. I suspect that many of you in this audience came to know me and this show through my film Against All Enemies, which describes how violent extremist groups are threatening our democracy. That film was a warning, which I am afraid went largely unheeded. America is now one of the world's leading exporters of violent extremist ideology, and the mainstream media is afraid to talk about it. Here's the crazy part. These legacy media organizations are not actually afraid of retaliation by violent extremists. They're afraid of the Trump administration. They worry that the current regime, through the FCC and the other levers of power it holds, will be offended and hurt business. We saw a version of this play out when Paramount canceled Stephen Colbert's show. So it's going to be up to independent outlets like this one and like those in Europe to tell hard truths about America that Paramount, CBS, and others are too afraid to share. My frequent guest and friend, Kris Goldsmith, stars in a newly released documentary on German television about the phenomenon we are now witnessing of America exporting terrorism. Here's our conversation. Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. We've got Kris Goldsmith back, the founder and leader of Task Force Butler and Veterans Fighting Fascism, which hold accountable extremists and impose legal and real-world costs on their activities. And he brought to my attention a German documentary about an American problem. It's called World White Hate. And it struck a chord with me because in producing Against All Enemies, which many in this audience are familiar with, we had a similar experience of American distributors terrified of telling the truth about right-wing extremism and its complicity with certain political movements in this country. I'm sure you'll get into it, Kris. And the Europeans were far braver in telling the truth because it ends up impacting them. There is a line in your latest Substack that really jumps out at me, and it gets to the heart of the issue here. You wrote, the Germans, the Europeans really recognize something our country continues to evade, that the United States is no longer merely vulnerable to far-right extremism. We're exporting it. We've made this the world's problem.
So World White Hate, this new documentary made by a German team, was just released, and it was filmed actually after Against All Enemies premiered in Tribeca. Everything that people watch in this documentary was filmed after you and I already exposed to the world the danger of these extremist organizations and how they have such important, dangerous ties to real power. You know, I think that a lot of folks look at my work and they look at quotes and articles about my work and they see like Nazis. Why is this guy talking about these swastika flying neo-Nazis? What do they matter? The degrees between the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and swastika flying neo-Nazis has been shrinking over time. I mean, he was always embracing the white supremacists. That's why the far right activists, and I mean Nazi activists, have supported him since 2015. But the man currently in power is implementing all of the policies that these neo-Nazis thought were only a dream. You know, whether it's building concentration camps in the United States or just raiding absolutely every workplace that they can to scoop up undocumented workers, to divide families, to create this climate of fear, not just in undocumented immigrants, but all immigrants and all Americans who come from vulnerable communities. People of color, veterans of color, have been scooped up by ICE and locked away without any sort of due process. And that is precisely what neo-Nazis wanted to happen. And what makes World White Hate unique is that it opens from the point of view, the camera point of view, of multiple mass shooters. Now, it doesn't show the actual murders themselves, but it does give you the perspective of the shooters themselves to help people understand that these domestic extremists and the foreign extremists that American extremists are inspiring are creating these made for TV moments that go viral and inspire other mass shooters.
You have done heroic work at Task Force Butler and Veterans Fighting Fascism in documenting these domestic violent extremist organizations, their leaders, their most violent members. But did you ever think you would also have to be taking on the media conglomerates, the corporate interests who have decided not to tell this story because it might offend the FCC or the President of the United States?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many stereotypes about liberal media bias that Donald Trump and Fox News and all of their ilk have baked into the minds of every American, so much so that we are seeing CBS and Paramount bowing to Donald Trump, providing him air cover when the man is a fascist and is trying to destroy their businesses.
And flat out bribes, flat out payoffs.
Yeah. And we saw it. I mean, I'm in a strange situation because I'm the subject of these documentaries and my work as a subject of these documentaries, but also as someone who wants to promote them because I need to get my work out there. Yeah, I'm in a weird situation where I'm watching from the inside, cooperating with you and the director of the other film, and trying to fight to get these streaming services, which could ostensibly be making money. We basically hand them a film and say, just play it. Let people watch this on demand. And they won't do it because they're afraid. They're afraid that even in the case of violent domestic extremists, if we expose what they're up to, the most rich and powerful and influential people, not just in politics, but in culture, have decided it's not worth this fight. I will not use every tool at my disposal to fight fascism. Instead, I'm just going to hunker down. I'm going to bring my family and my wealth close, and good luck to the rest of you, because, democracy doesn't matter to these people. All that matters is their own personal net worth.
Hey, it's Ken Harbaugh. Quick break to say thank you to everyone who's been following and supporting this show and this channel. None of it happens without you. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my Substack page, I'd really appreciate the follow. It's a great way to make sure you never miss an episode. It's free to sign up. And if you're able to pitch in a few bucks, every dollar goes back into the show. Just search for The Ken Harbaugh Show on Substack or click the link below. Thanks. When we were in negotiations to sell the overseas rights to Against All Enemies, bring this up because I'm wondering if you had a similar experience or at least insight when it comes to the new documentary World White Hate. We had an early conversation with an executive from German public TV, either DW or Arte, same distributors behind World White Hate. And I was curious. I mean, the conversation was going really well, but I had to ask, why do you care about this film? Like, why do you care about what's happening with American veterans joining American domestic violent extremist groups? And her answer floored me. She said, well, I'm German. We know what happens when you lose a generation of veterans. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that really put the fear of God into me, thinking about what happens in this country if a critical mass of veterans decide to take up arms and betray their oaths.
Yeah, the Germans have seen this recently. They have had to purge their military and their police forces of Nazis in just the last few years. They have seen this cancer growing within their own uniformed services. But part of their constitution in Germany is to stand up against things like Nazism. It is part of their constitution that gives every German the right or the responsibility to fight against Nazis. Here in the United States, we have failed in that lesson from history. The civil rights era was not the first time that we saw our country splitting apart and devaluing people, right? America was founded with the original sin of slavery. After the Civil War, rather than punish the Confederates, rather than treat them like criminals, the United States welcomed it back in. Reconstruction completely fell apart. So all of the black people who were freed effectively became slaves again. And then we went on.
And to be clear, that was a political calculation. It wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about trying to knit the country back together. It was a crude political calculation to end Reconstruction that had nothing to do with reconciliation.
Yep. It had everything to do with keeping the rich and powerful rich and powerful. The parcels of land that were supposed to be given to freed slaves were confiscated from them again and given back to their old masters. This terrible lesson that we refuse to learn from history echoes throughout American history, and the most recent and relevant is what happened on January 6th. Rather than move swiftly and punish the criminals who attempted to destroy our democracy, from Donald Trump down, we had Merrick Garland sit on his hands and just hope that, well, the system's going to hold itself together. Now we have a felon who is the president of the United States, who is not just promising retribution, he's engaging in retribution. He's not just promising deportations, he's building concentration camps and filling them with families that have, given up everything that they know to come to the United States, to then get deported to a third country, even Africa, right? The cruelty, the hatred that informs Donald Trump and his policies are not very different from these mass shooter neo-Nazis, the swastika flying, obsessed with Nazi history freaks. Donald Trump is making their dreams come true.
That was part one of my conversation with Kris Goldsmith. Check out part two tomorrow, where we talk about the evolution in how right-wing extremists in this country now view Donald Trump. See you then.